Chapter 10. Science and Decree. We have seen that, as Houston Smith has pointed out, science has embarked on a fourfold program whereby life, mind, man, and society are to be created or recreated by a science which displaces God as the source of the eternal decree. Smith, of course, has a happy solution to this conflict of science and religion. He sees a, quote, revolution in Western thought, producing a new view of reality, end quote, which is bringing science, philosophy, and religion together in a common allegiance to process. We must bypass this happy return to Baalism for a further consideration of the fourfold program. It is, in essence, a new sovereign decree. Thus, it is not predestination in itself which is an offense to man, but predestination by God. The culmination of process is control of the various aspects and phases of process by scientific man, so that evolution is to be guided and controlled, life is to be created, minds invented as tools of the new gods, human minds shaped and directed by the gods of science through chemistry, and society itself made into a great machine in which man, economics, education, sexual reproduction, and all else are made subservient to predestination by scientific controllers. This form of predestination is the truly horrible decree. This new doctrine of predestination rests, moreover, on a background of universal mindlessness and chance. The vast ocean of being in process has been guided by no mind and has operated in terms of chance set in the context of endless and infinite process. The quote-unquote God of this vast ocean is time. For, given enough time, it is believed that all miracles are possible and even certain. Bryson has stated it more strongly. Quote, "The laws of chance do not entirely eliminate even the remotest possibility. If the Earth is at least 5,000 million years old, almost anything, however unlikely, could have happened here at least once, and it needed to happen only once." End quote. Handrick, in discussing radioactivity as an age indicator, has pointed out how the evidence militates against these vast time schemes. For religious reasons, however, such an argument is ineffectual with most scientists, whose faith requires the long time spans to account for miracles which are clearly contrary to all contemporary scientific theory. Hoagland has clearly stated what it is believed that chance and time can do. Quote, "But a special view of probability is required when one thinks about these matters. According to this view, if an extremely improbable event needs to occur but once, then the likelihood of its occurrence becomes increasingly possible the longer time permitted for a variety of trials. In the case of possible spontaneous generation from life, as we shall see, there have been a great many opportunities for chance to bring all sorts of molecules together over an exceedingly long time. But Volt has also pointed out how highly improbable events, if they occur but once or only rarely, may become highly probable given a long enough time and enough trials. Spontaneous generation is such a once-to-happen variety of phenomena. Since once a primitive organism that can reproduce itself is formed, natural selection could modify it and start life on its way down the ages. Volt gives several illustrations of this point about probability. For example, the chance that a coin when tossed will not fall head up in a single toss is 1/2. The chance that no head will appear in a series of 10 tosses is 1/2 multiplied by itself 10 times. That is 1/2, or 1 in 1,000. Therefore, the chance that a head will appear at least once in 10 trials is 999 to 1,000, or a virtual certainty. Let us consider the example of an event which has a chance of happening only once in 1,000 times. The chance that such an event will not occur in any one try is 99 out of 1,000. However, in 1,000 trials, this chance becomes 999 out of 1,000 multiplied by itself 1,000 times, and this turns out to be 37 out of 1,000. The chance that it will happen at least once is therefore 63 to 100, or better than 3 out of 5. In 10,000 trials, the chance that this event will occur at least once is 19,999 to 20,000, a virtual certainty. Thus, very improbable events may become highly probable ones given enough time in trials." End quote. This illustration is, of course, a variation of the earlier and more familiar one. If 100 monkeys at 100 typewriters typed for enough millennia, they would, through sheer chance, reproduce all the plays of Shakespeare. The sorry fact about both illustrations is a very obvious oversight. Where did the 100 monkeys, typewriters, paper, coins, and tosser come from first of all? Who is to keep the tosser tossing? The coins from wear or loss, the monkeys from wrecking the typewriters in the first try, and so on. To account for the potentialities of chance, a vast realm of being and purposive activity must first be presupposed. What is called the operation of chance more closely resembles controlled experimentation in a laboratory. Controlled possibility, in terms of necessary and provided materials, is by no means to be confused with chance. Thus, the concept of chance which is employed is a self-contradictory concept and is by no means valid at any point. Despite this confusion, the fact remains that the scientist believes in chance as the agent of cosmic catalysts, as the God which fathered the universe and man. Now, however, the old God is in triumphant process of being unseated by the new gods, the scientists, whose intelligent, eternal decree or control will steadily become the new source of creation. Thus, even as Uranus was castrated by Cronus in Greek mythology, so chance is being steadily eliminated by scientific controls designed to govern the total life and economy of man in terms of the new eternal decree of science. Those who welcome this new society forget that Cronus maintained his decree only so long as he devoured his children. A cosmos, or a society fashioned and controlled by man, will inevitably serve man's purposes. A society controlled by scientists will only serve the radically relativistic purposes of the new gods, and none other. As the new philosopher kings and Platonic guardians, they will assume the role of God, mind, and purpose for society as a living source of the counsel of predestination. A world created by God will inevitably serve God's purposes because it is governed by His sovereign decree. In terms of this, creation cannot serve the fourfold program of scientists, nor be amenable to it, inasmuch as it is beyond their control and impervious to their reckoning. God, who created all things out of nothing, so that not only the universe but also space itself came into being by His sovereign decree, alone governs that creation and alone established its nature and destiny. The people imagine a vain thing, Psalm 2:1, when they take counsel together concerning their pretensions, hopes, and programs. The philosophy of process, as it appears in churchmen, is responsible for a double heresy. First, process or works is introduced into the order of salvation to diminish or supplant the saving work of God with man's own efficacious act. Second, process or works is introduced into the creation of the universe in order to diminish or set aside the divine act, and behind it, the divine decree, in favor of a new, emergent, and increasingly decisive decree, the sovereign work of scientific man. The fourfold program poses no metaphysical threat to the faith. It does pose an ethical threat to all men in the form of God's judgment. As Donald Cowan has observed, quote, "The completely secular ideology of the modern scientist is reflected in the total relativism of our dominant cosmological myth. Our modern cosmological myths are devoid of moral and spiritual content." End quote. The absence of this content is a philosophical necessity. Just as law cannot be set above God without becoming a God over God, so a moral law cannot be set above scientific man without infringing upon his sovereignty. It is significant that increasingly quote-unquote scientific educators, after Dewey, refuse to hope for a quote-unquote changed society and speak rather of the goal of a changing or controlled society, always fully controlled and always in process for process's sake. The radical quote-unquote freedom from all law save process leaves this new God-man free to reign in a hell and chaos of his own designing. This quote-unquote freedom the fallen sons of Adam have sought since their banishment from Eden. Darwin therefore met not a scientific need, but a religious hunger. When his On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection was published on November 24, 1859, the entire edition of 1,250 copies sold out on the day of publication. Its contents met with a fanatical popular approval before a word of it had been read. Men have been pleased to invent a myth of the persecution of this new idea. In reality, the opposition was scattered and came more from some scientists than churchmen, scientists in the exact sciences who were shocked at the substitution of theory for observation. Bernard Shaw, in commenting on the happy reception the theory of evolution received, remarked, quote, "If you can realize how insufferably the world was oppressed by the notion that everything that happened was an arbitrary personal act of an arbitrary personal God of dangerous, jealous, and cruel personal character, you will understand how the world jumped at Darwin." End quote. Lunn, in citing Darwin's success, observed, quote, "His immense success was partly due to the fact that he happened to restate these theories at the precise moment when theophobia, the fear or dislike of God, was on the increase, and when a majority of scientists were looking for some alternative to what Huxley calls the untenable theory of special creation." End quote. Thus, the rebellion is against the eternal decree of God in favor of the new and sovereign decree of scientific man. The controversy between contemporary science and biblical faith is not a scientific issue, but a religious one, and some scientists are becoming aware of this fact. This is clearly apparent in an article by a biochemist, Philip Siekowitz, in The Nation, September 3, 1958. Quote, "The revolution going on in the biological sciences, mainly in biochemistry, will make atomic energy look like child's play. Therefore, and more urgently than ever, we need a revolution in our political and social institutions to cope with these findings. We are even about to learn how to change ourselves. I think that we are approaching the greatest event in human history, even in the history of life on this earth, and that is the deliberate changing by man of many of the biological processes. With all the knowledge thus gained, we will be able to plan ahead so that our children will be what we would like them to be, physically and even mentally. At this point, man will be remolding his own being. Theologians will protest, but it is certainty itself that man will play God." End quote. Here is rampant pride that the scientist will outdo God and usher in, quote, "the greatest event in human history." End quote. Because of this scientific man who is insistent on playing God, we are asked to alter our political and social institutions in terms of the reality of this new quote-unquote God. It is no wonder that Edmund A. Opitz, in citing these words, observes, quote, "This may not be madness, but surely it approaches the brink of madness of a sort. In any event, those who resist the idea of both the molding and the being remolded had better retrace their steps to the point where our path took a wrong turning. The recovery of sanity will be a route different from the one we have been following." End quote.